I am ready. Do you think that we can start? Okay. Yeah. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. It's a glad to participate in our second webinar. Due to the cancellation of the ESHA biannual conference, which was supposed to be organized in Cyprus in October 2020, ESHA decided to organize an educational leadership series of webinars. This is our second webinar. The first one was implemented on the 22nd of October, 2 weeks ago, and we had the opportunity to share experiences from the crisis situation we experienced in Europe and the universe. In our first webinar, we had a panel discussion with experts, and Frank facilitated the discussion by setting some questions and presenting some research results. This week, our webinar has a slightly different structure. We have two presenters from Cyprus. First, we are going to map the territory to set the context of the educational system of Cyprus by Dr. Andreas Tsiakkiros, who works for the Ministry of Education in Cyprus. And secondly, we're going to present lessons we experienced from the pandemic from Professor Charalambos Vradidas from the University of Nicosia and the organization of CARDET to explain the structure of today's webinar. After the two presentations, we're going to give time for discussion. There are some questions, and we can also set questions through the chat. The presenters will discuss the questions. They can clarify some aspects of their presentation, and we will have the opportunity to participate through the chat and through some poll questions. The webinar will be released as it is recorded, and everyone will have access to that. And we are going to send information regarding new webinars that will follow. Today, we will focus on Cyprus and how this small European country reacted to the challenge of the pandemic. After the presentation of the system, we are going to present some lessons learned. First of all, let me thank the two presenters, Dr. Andreas Tsiakkiros and Dr. Charalambos Vradidas, and also thank ESHA board and especially Fred and Luca for the honor to host this webinar today on behalf of Cyprus. If we are ready, I will introduce our first presenter. Dr. Andreas Tsiakkiros currently holds the position of a Senior Educational Planning Officer at the Ministry of Education, and he is the head of the Special Education Office. He is also employed at the Open University of Cyprus as an adjunct faculty. He has served as Vice President of the Commonwealth Council for Educational Administration and Management. As an academic, his interests are focused on strategic planning, management, decentralization, and school autonomy. Dear Andreas, we are very ready to follow your presentation.
Thank you, Kostas. I hope everybody hears me well at least and sees the presentation. I would like first to thank the European School Heads Association for the invitation to present the Cyprus educational system, as well as the Cyprus Primary School Heads Association for addressing this invitation to present the educational system of Cyprus. I'll just give you an overview of how the system works, so to be able to better understand what my colleague Charalambos Vradidas will follow afterwards with how the system responded and reacted to the challenge of the pandemic. Let me start first by some introductory comments. The Cyprus educational system in its current form is basically the outcome of the developments that established the Republic of Cyprus back in 1960. This year, 2020, we are celebrating the 60th anniversary of the establishment of the Republic. The education is considered in Cyprus not only as a basic human right, but as an essential investment. That's why the whole society attributes great value to education. The aim of the legal framework, the structure, the curriculum, as well as the staffing and the policy reforms is to upgrade the quality of education provided. Now, some important dates in the history of the Republic. First of all, in 1965, the Ministry of Education was established. As you might know, in 1974, we had the Turkish invasion of the island. And in 1992, we had the establishment of the first public university. The next year, compulsory primary as well as lower secondary education up to the age of 15 was introduced, whereas a major landmark in the history of the system was the island's accession to the EU back in 2004. The same year, we had the introduction of compulsory free pre-primary education, whereas in 2011, we had the introduction of new curricula and new timetables, both from the level of pre-primary up to the lower secondary level. The latest change was the way the teachers are appointed, which took place in 2018. The core principles on which the system is based is that education is considered as part of the wider socioeconomic and cultural context of Cyprus, and this context should be taken into account during the formulation of educational objectives. At the same time, there is a strong link and mutual influence between education and social reality. That is why education should have an internal as well as an external coherence, as well as a democratic structure of management. As you might know, the Cyprus educational system is quite centralized. The highest authority is the ministry. At the ministry is the minister, who is a political position, followed by the permanent secretary of the ministry, which is a civil servant. Education is basically offered in four main stages, as you will see in the next slide, whereas other departments and services help the overall functioning of the system. The provisional public expenditure on education in 2018 amounted to 5.9% of the gross domestic product, which is mainly one of the highest within the European Union. In the structure you see here, you can realize that the system is quite centralized because all the departments and services are under the permanent secretary and the minister. Education is basically offered in primary, secondary, general, technical, and vocational, as well as higher education, whereas there are other departments that help the functioning of the system, that, for example, the Pedagogical Institute, which is the competent body for teachers in service training, as well as the educational psychology service, the technical services for the school infrastructure, and other units with regards to the administration and human resource units, as well as the account office. Just to give you an overview of how centralized the system is, in this slide you can see some of the responsibilities of the ministry. First of all, the ministry is responsible for the management of education, as well as the enforcement of educational laws and the preparation of educational bills. The ministry also prescribes curricula and textbooks, and the regulation as well as the supervision of educational institutions is also a responsibility of the ministry. At the same time, the construction of school buildings is under the auspices of the technical services, whereas the maintenance and equipment of schools is a shared responsibility with local school boards. As a result, basically, public education is financed by the government. The system also has an independent five-member body appointed by the Council of Ministers, the Educational Service Commission, for a period of 6 years. And this commission is responsible for the appointments, the promotions, the transfers, the secondments, the disciplinary matters, as well as the retirements of all the educational staff appointed throughout Cyprus. Until recently, teachers were appointed through a waiting list. Basically, this was according to the birth of certificate. As I have already said, the system changed in 2018, and until 2027, we will have a mixed system. Half of the appointments are made through the old way, whereas half of the appointments are made through other procedure, which is basically taken into account the examination results that candidates take. As part of the economic reform program that we were obliged to enroll in, all the ministries of the government are now by law required to prepare a comprehensive strategic plan. So like all the ministries, the ministry has now its own strategic plan for the 3 years, 2020 until 2022. Whereas in this strategic plan, the mission, the vision, as well as the strategic goals of the educational system are set. The goals are then divided into objectives, and the departments of the ministry have their activities when they work with an action plan where all their activities should be included in the budget. And in order to monitor and follow the progress, each department has set its own key performance indicators. The ministry's vision is to literate citizens with skills, responsibility, democratic ethos, historical identity, as well as respect for diversity. We want citizens with a wholesome personality that are capable to creatively contribute to the development of society and to cope with the challenges of the future, as well as the improvement of citizens' quality of life through education and culture. The values on which the ministry is based are integrity and respect, teamwork, effectiveness and efficiency, accountability, active citizenship, effective communication, and service to the society. In the last few years, an educational reform is taking place. The aim of this reform is to turn into reality the vision of a better educational system that would meet pupils' future needs, as well as the society's challenges in the 21st century. And in order to build consensus to the highest possible extent and to ensure the continuity of educational policy, we believe that the participation of all stakeholders in this dialogue is essential. That is why it is pursued. The democratic and human-centered school is the desirable type of school for the pupils of Cyprus. The modernization of the education system is taking place basically in these 6 pillars. First of all, as I have already said, the content of the curricula has changed. At the same time, the timetables and the structure of the school programs have been reformed in order to be compatible with the curriculum. The teacher's appointment system has also changed, whereas there has been an introduction of a teacher's professional learning scheme, a unified policy that is currently implemented, whereas each school develops its own school development plan and have the flexibility to set their own goals that will satisfy the schools as well as the teachers' needs. There have also been introduced various measures to make the schools functioning better, and The one pillar that is currently pending and there has no progress taking place to it is the teacher evaluation system, which is in place since 1976. There have been many efforts to change this, and I think you all realize why this has not taken place, because it immediately affects teachers' rights, and that's why we have not been able until today to change the evaluation system of teachers. Now, pre-primary and primary education, the official education starts at the age of 3. It is compulsory and free for 1 year and 4 months prior to attending the primary school. And we have 3 types of kindergartens according to the finance of the schools: the public, the community, and private. Primary education has a 6-year duration and it is offered free. Of course, it is compulsory, and schools function in every town and village where there is a minimum number of 15 pupils. Throughout the system, the maximum number of pupils per class is 25. Now, secondary education, we have 2 cycles. The first one is the lower, the gymnasium, where a basic general education that is free and compulsory for 3 years is offered. There has also been an introduction of a new timetable in the gymnasium, and the upper secondary cycle, which is again 3 years, it's free but not compulsory, is divided to the lyceum as well as the technical and vocational education and training. In both the lyceum as well as the technical education, changes are taking place, since pupils now to the lyceum need to select their subjects and follow a specific direction of study, whereas in regards to the technical education, a strategic planning has been introduced by the Council of Ministers, which ends this year, because there is a low level of pupils in technical education, and a new strategic plan has been developed to attract more pupils in technical and vocational education. As I have already said, the Pedagogical Institute is responsible for the teachers' professional learning. A new development that took place also is the unified policy for teachers' professional learning. At the same time, the Institute offers compulsory in-service training to teachers, optional courses that are offered centrally and are held during the afternoon. These optional courses meet the professional needs of teachers, and emphasis is given on action research at the level of the school. Also, seminars, workshops, and conferences are organized by the Institute that take into account teachers' needs, the ministry's priorities, as well as the new trends. The school-based training is taking place where emphasis is on the development of schools through intervention programs, and the Institute also participates in other research, such as the local ones that take place in Cyprus, as well as the international studies like PISA or TIMSS. With regards to the higher education area, the government's policy aims to satisfy local needs and at the same time establish Cyprus as a regional education and research center. That's why there is quite a big number of both public as well as private universities. The system is shaped by the European higher education area as outlined by the Bologna process, and higher education consists of both public and private institutions at the university and non-university levels. Recently, the Agency of Quality Assurance and Accreditation in Higher Education has been established, which is responsible for ensuring the quality of higher education. With regards to private education, are owned by individuals or bodies. According to the law for private education, all private schools need to be approved by the ministry and function according to the provisions of the law. They are supervised and inspected by ministry's officials, and of course, pupils who choose to attend a private school pay fees. According to the curriculum and the timetable that each private school uses, we have 3 different types: the same, similar, and different. And as you might realize, those schools that follow the exact timetable and curriculum like public schools fall under the same schools, the same type schools. Those that have similar timetables and curricula are similar type, and those who follow a completely different curriculum and timetable are of different type. However, those schools who fall under the categorization of similar and different types are obliged by the law that their pupils take at least 9 teaching hours per week in Greek language. According to the Constitution of Cyprus, we have 3 main communities, that they are the Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots, and also we have 3 religious groups. All children, regardless of the community in which they fall, enjoy their full rights with regards to access to education. And Turkish Cypriot pupils and the pupils of the 3 religious groups that are Armenians, Latins, and Maronites may attend a public or a private school of their choice. In case these students opt to attend private schools in the government-controlled areas, their fees are fully subsidized by the ministry. At the same time, the ministry offers the services of school teachers in the Maronite and Armenian schools in order to teach the Greek language. Now, with regards to some of the innovations that have been introduced in the system in the past few years, just to highlight a few of them, we had, as I have already said, the introduction of the new curricula and timetables, and based on the curricula, there has been an introduction of success and adequacy indicators. The establishment of summer schools in primary education and music and sports schools in secondary education is another innovation. The secondary school regulations have changed recently in order to be compatible with the current trends, and the operation of post-secondary institutes for technical and vocational education and training took place. The ministry has also a policy document on the integration of pupils with migrant background. The expansion of the age in pre-primary and primary education has also changed by law. Currently, students go to the 1st grade of primary school at the age of 6. There has been an introduction of a code of anti-racist policy as well as a national strategy against violence in schools, and a comprehensive national strategy for the prevention and combating of children's sexual abuse has also been implemented. With regards to higher education, the universities are now able to offer courses and programs of study in English, and the ministry also established the Cyprus Academy of Science, Letters, and Arts. Now, with regards to the challenges ahead of us, first of all, we think that there needs to be a qualitative upgrade of the system in order to become more flexible and effective. And a necessary change that needs to take place is to unify the system in order to ensure unity, continuity, as well as consistency between all levels. We do realize that there needs to be an introduction of monitoring and accountability mechanisms, and at the same time, we have to combat the low achievement and early school leaving. We want to help pupils acquire the key competences for lifelong learner and strengthen the links between vocational education and the labor market. As I have already said, what is pending is to have a new proposal for teachers' evaluation system, and a challenge that is recent, and I'm sure my colleague Pambos will elaborate more, is how to effectively use distance education. I would like to finish my presentation by pointing out a quote that Confucius made a number of years ago, which I think is relevant for today. that if your plan is for 1 year, then you should plan rice. If your plan is for 10 years, then you should plant trees. But if your plan is for 100 years, then you should educate children. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm willing to answer any questions or provide any clarifications after the second presentation. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Andreas. I think it's really a comprehensive presentation about the system of the country. As a school head for the last 10 years, I can confirm that we experience a totally centralized educational system, beginning from budget, curriculum, even the evaluation of teachers. However, we should say that there is always space for autonomy. Mm-hmm. And this thing explains the crucial role of leadership in schools. We will have the opportunity to discuss this centralized character of the system with regard to the crisis, whether that was an advantage or a disadvantage in the period of crisis. But I will thank you again, and I will ask everybody to feel free to send the questions through the chat. We collect them, and the presenters will answer the questions after the second presentation. Now, please let me introduce the second speaker for today, our friend Charalambos Vradidas, Bambos. Bambos is co-founder and executive director of CARDET. CARDET is an international non-profit research and development organization based in Cyprus with partners from around the world. He's also a professor of learning, innovation, and policy, an associate dean for e-learning at the University of Nicosia. He serves on the executive committee of the International Council for Educational Media, and in past he served as program director for more than 100 projects implemented around the world. Today, we expect from Bambos to present lessons we learned from the pandemic, and especially from the effort to implement e-learning processes during the pandemic lockdown in a centralized educational system. I think that Andreas has set and has mapped the territory, and we are ready to follow your presentation, Bambos. Welcome to our webinar.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the honor to share some of our lessons learned with all of you. It's an honor to be here. Let me share the screen. Okay, so you can see my screen now, I assume?
Yes.
So, what I will talk about, I will share also practical aspects because I wear two hats. One, I'm the founder of CARDET. The other, I'm also associated for e-learning. I happen to have my core expertise to be the online education, and designed my first online course in '96 when I was in the US doing my PhD, and then my first full virtual high school in Illinois in the year 2000, so exactly 20 years ago. Since then, I was involved in many initiatives like that, and it happens to be one of our core areas. What CARDET is a nonprofit that we established about 15 years ago. We have core expertise in the area of education, which is our primary area. And then we also do a lot of work in social justice and in innovation and so on. 4 issues I will try to go for you today. The one is a few ideas about online education, because there are a lot of issues that are not clear. There are a lot of overlaps of terminology, and also some myths that I would like to tackle at the end of the presentation. The other is that, which is the core, I will share with you some of the key findings from the research we did during the summer on distance education and how it was applied in public schools. Summarize some issues on the leader's role, because in a lot of conversations we have with schools, teachers, and leaders, and also from our experience, what we feel, what is the direction we need to go, and of course, close with some systemic recommendations that they come through in a lot of the things that we also know from the literature. The first issue we need to clarify is that distance education, when designed properly, can be as effective and sometimes more effective than traditional schooling. This is very important to remember, okay? And we will address it later. But when designed properly, that's the key defining words of this sentence. The other issue is that traditionally, because we focus on the term distance learning, oftentimes the emphasis is on the distance and not on the learning. Modern approaches to online education focus on designing learning environments, learning experiences where we can facilitate that. And we also need to distinguish the two important aspects of online education, at least how the world experienced it during the pandemic. It's very different when we are asked to teach online under emergency conditions, and different when we have the time to strategically plan about it, short term and long term. So what happened during the pandemic, globally, the truth is no country was prepared for that. Some countries might have responded better, but the reality of the matter is that was a global challenge. You can overnight have 1.5 billion learners fully online and expect that things will run smoothly. Distance education is not something new, okay? People have been learning for hundreds of years, thousands of years. And if we really think about it, the way traditional schooling is structured has about 100 years, 120 years history, okay? So we've been learning informally and in other structured ways before traditional schooling was invented the way we know it. And we also have a false assumption around schooling. We assume that the traditional schooling, and oftentimes we compare it with online education, we assume is the best model for everybody, for all subjects, for all learners, for all teachers. Well, the research shows it's not, and we know that. However, in a lot of the discussions, we put front that traditional schooling is the right model for everybody. We also know a lot of factors that contribute to whether distance education will be successful or not. It has to do with whether we have a solid plan, strategy and leadership are key. Of course, infrastructure and access, it goes without saying. If I cannot access the resources or my students or the students between them, there is not much that I can do. Professional development, the age group matters. We cannot be discussing distance education for early childhood education or for the early years of primary education, the same way we discuss about lyceum or higher education. The need for online support, the subject matter has importance, the learning design, evaluation, and so on. But we will touch on this later through the evaluation. The key aspect of online education, distance education, e-learning, like the key aspect of education itself, is interaction. No education and learning can take place unless there is interaction between learners or learner teacher or learner with concepts, tools, resources, and so on. So the interaction part, the construct, is an important element of online education and distance education. In the online, we have a lot of adjustments we have to make because we don't have the immediacy. Even now, we have the cameras on, you can look at me, I see some of you, some not. The eye contact, and the feedback I get either from head noddings or expressions, is what is called in sociolinguistics back channeling. When I have that, the interaction flourishes. I can say, you ask, and we communicate. Online, the only way to have this back channeling is if you have a live connection with a camera on, or when you send a message and you receive a text back. This is it. Therefore, there needs to be a lot of good design to compensate for the lack of the immediacy, the speed, the coherence, and the visual aspect, so that we can have a good result. The other important element of education in general, but even more for online education, is what is called the idea of social presence. This construct, as a theoretical construct, began from the 70s from research in the area of telecommunications. And it was early defined as the degree to which learners and teachers feel socially present with others. I'm oversimplifying the definitions, but basically that's the essence. So the importance for the online, and we know that, is the need for connectedness, the need for constant communication. It's not enough to send some exercises to learners. Excuse me. We need the constant communication and exchange. And how do we design that? We know from higher education that we have high attrition rates, high dropout rates from online programs. And the research shows those learners with an external locus of control, meaning those who feel that their success is a result of external factors and not their own commitment and abilities, are more likely to drop out. So there are certain learning characteristics we know work better in the adult sector, okay? So a lot of issues to have in mind. Equity, critical. There is a constant debate that this online education sector might be accentuating the digital divide. Instead of giving opportunities to people, it accentuates it, it makes the gap bigger. But there is also a very sad issue we need to have in mind, okay? There was a lot of debate about schools to open, not to open, it's safer to be closed. There is research that shows closing schools for 2 months will have lifetime impact on high-risk students, meaning those students who are not performing well, who had literacy problems, who were at high risk of dropping out or not going on. If they lose 2 months of schooling, you might lose them forever. The impact on their life might be much longer than we think. So there are a lot of ethical dilemmas that we need to consider in decisions about that. And of course, equity around the skills, and not just skills of the learner or the teacher. In primary school, the skills of the parents as well was important. And we know that because the communication oftentimes for primary school ages, it was with parents, not directly with students. So a big uncertainty, I think, that came and overwhelmed globally countries, schools, teachers, families, schools with open. Now the uncertainty is that will schools close? We started seeing lockdowns in many countries, but schools are still open. And the question is, for how long? Is it the main reason safety? Is it economic? You know, the exams, if we schools, what happens? During April, May, the big debate was for the last year high school students who their exams will define their entrance in universities. The issues of health protocols, should everybody wear a mask or not? When will the skill begin? Issues of mental health, fundamental, huge impact globally. And of course, the importance of positive relations, that is one of the things I will touch upon in a bit. As a center who has a special expertise in education and particularly in educational and learning technologies, during the pandemic, we proposed to the ministry to conduct a research that would document 4 key issues. The first was to take a look at, under these emergency conditions, how was distance education implemented in public schools? We also addressed some of the private schools, but the majority was on public schools. Meaning what methods were used, what tools, and so on. The second was we wanted to document the challenges, but also the good practices. What are some of the good things that came out? You know, if you want to impact policy and you focus only on challenges, nobody will listen to you. But if you focus also to try to identify some good practices and try to also promote those, this is how you engage in dialogue, not if you want to do advocacy. And of course, what did we learn from all this during the pandemic? We had the strong support for this research of the Cyprus Pedagogical Institute and the full support of the Ministry of Education. But the research itself was conducted exclusively from our research center for free, just to be clear. We didn't get paid for this research. So what did we do? We had already conducted research in the past in the area. So to design our online tool, we held several focus groups with primary school teachers and principals, secondary, vocational education, and we also held focus group with parents and a focus group with officials of the Pedagogical Institute of the Ministry who were responsible to support teachers during the online implementations. In addition to that, we conducted interviews with all key stakeholders, the Director of Primary Education, the Director of the Ministry of Secondary Education, the Director of the Pedagogical Institute, the Director of Vocational Education. We conducted interviews with key representatives of all the teacher unions, the primary school union, the secondary vocational union, and also the Pangibria, that is the parents associations, okay? And even the students associations, the high school students. So we tried to give a voice to everybody. Our idea was we need to bring all key perspectives on the table so that we can better understand. And of course, we analyzed a lot of the circulars that were used during the implementation. The announcements were all posted on the website of the ministry and so on. We developed a tool, piloted it, and then it had a high Chrome byte, was around 0.85, if I recall it correctly. But I have to point out one main limitation. Our questionnaire, because of the COVID and the lockdown, could only be administered electronically. This means that those who responded to the questionnaire, teachers and principals, are more likely to be teachers and principals who are more comfortable with using technology, okay? So I would like to point that up front before we go any further. So I will start with some of the positive outcomes. There was a huge effort undertaken by the teachers, the principals, and the schools themselves. From our detailed analysis, and every teacher you speak to, it was clear that there was a heavy burden for long hours on the teachers and schools. This led to an increased amount of collaboration. We had statements from interviews and focus groups that this collaboration was amazing on how the community of teachers came together and how important the school principal was with the supporting vice principals to support the initiative, because schools were asked to develop an action plan to document the needs. So we saw a lot of leadership there at the school level, even in a centralized system like Cyprus. The other important aspect was the increased collaboration between parents and teachers. And the parents themselves told us, and the associations, their officials, they said clearly, for the first time, we had such a close collaboration and regular communication to coordinate our efforts. And of course, and this is a global phenomenon, unfortunately, we waited for such a pandemic to accelerate some of the changes that needed to take place in education. and basic one, the more use of technology, the development of digital skills. Some of the key barriers that we saw, and those came out from the interviews and focus groups, but also from the questionnaire. We had more than 1,000 responses on the questionnaire, but the fully completed were 549. So we only focused analyzing the fully completed questionnaires. And it was about half-half, primary and secondary vocational. We had some challenges in Cyprus. The first was, once the lockdown came, we kind of got into a panic mode. And this, I think, is something that is a global. We were not prepared. The truth is, no country was prepared. So we cannot say it's the ministry's responsibility because it was not prepared. I don't think anybody was expecting such a lockdown. So there was a need to improve a bit the coordination because there were some circulars going, maybe some contradicting. There were some disagreements, which was not clear. That created some kind of a unnecessary misunderstanding beyond the one already created by the pandemic and the lockdown. The other important aspect is that it was not very clear at the beginning of whether schools should proceed by teaching new content or focus on repeating some of the past content and giving exercises. And then later, it was decided for the last year high school students who were going to take exams for their entrance universities to give emphasis on those first. Of course, the extra time that was needed for developing content, because a lot of the teachers, they had to develop a lot of the content from scratch. One of the resources that got the highest use among schools was the school's website, because teachers collaborated, uploaded material there, and they exchanged it there so everybody can access. Plus the resources that the ministry has on their portal and also the Pedagogical Institute. One of the key challenges and which came through was also the access to technology. Access for both schools, teachers, and learners and their families. From an initial estimate, it seemed we had several hundred students and families that did not have a device at home or internet. So there was a challenge there. Now, as we speak, there are efforts by the ministry to address a lot of those challenges. However, during the pandemic, that was a real challenge. The other big challenge was the infrastructure of schools. A lot of the schools did not have the right bandwidth. It's one thing to have internet connection. It's another to have enough bandwidth for 10 teachers simultaneously to connect live with 200 students. It's a very different technology requirement. So in our research, we found that 1 out of 3 of the teachers daily, they had to solve technical problems, okay? And of course, there are many other challenges, including, we had several issues with the personal data issue, GDPR. Where will we use Zoom or Teams or these? Which one we have license for what GDPR recommendation and agreement? Will we have camera on or off? What happens with personal data? There are a lot of debates still going on around that area. One of the aspects that we need to highlight is that teachers themselves, they ask for the teacher professional development. They ask for learning opportunities. And some of the key issues you can see here, after the focus groups and analysis we did, we put several items down to ask them to choose the most important for them. One of the most important that came up front is how to use technology in the online to promote interaction among learners, among teachers, and the material. I have to point out that during the pandemic, the primary practice, and we'll see later, was teacher-centered, okay? But it was expected. I mean, when you have all those challenges. Other needs include aspects of learning design, on communication, the training on different tools. We even had as the fifth, people asked how to troubleshoot technology. Came up as the fifth highest ranked in the option of what teachers wanted. Regarding now what would mean to do this properly and what are the needs and factors to consider, you can see here the need for doing a proper needs assessment, not just infrastructure, but a lot of other aspects, curriculum assessment and so on. Training for everybody, the legal framework of online education and so on, but I will discuss those later. What we have to look now though, through online education and in distance education, there are several myths, and these myths existed before, some continue to exist. The first myth is that online education is a poor alternative for emergency situations of the face-to-face. The research shows the opposite, okay? Using the traditional face-to-face as the model to judge the quality of online education is false. The other myth is that online education, distance education is easy. If you ask now the teachers, you'll be lucky to find one that will say, yes, it's easy. Because it's much harder if you want to do it properly and plan ahead and design material. The other myth is that, and this often we heard in many countries, don't worry, distance education is temporary, it's not here to stay. We often hear distance education is to keep the learning flame alive and a lot of other romantic views about education. Well, distance education is here to stay and it will continue. And so we have 5 minutes left. Very nice. So let's go now and see at one of our key findings, that lessons we learned, is that if you look at what we want to address in education, I think one of the aspects we don't tackle very well is character. And that's where all the aspects we feel that had to do with resilience, the issues of mental health that come through, and of course, the need for character education and the importance for resilience and positive relationships in the school. We'll see through a project that we run now called the Positive Behavior Support. Actually, we put a big focus on supporting schools around all these areas of inclusion, resilience, and teaching social skills. What we found is that for leadership, in these cases, we saw that schools and with teachers that we spoke, the school leader was critical for the implementation during the pandemic and of course for the whole operation of the school, but maintaining positive relationships is key. The need for professional development and have connected communities for school leaders to learn from each other is also important. The importance for communication, the clarity of vision and mission, and that's where the school has to take initiative to have clear objectives, particularly during these situations. And of course, understanding the role of technology and how it can accelerate change. There are a lot of other issues we could discuss. Concluding, this is a summary of the recommendations we actually presented to the ministry. And if you look at recent reports by the Global Harvard Education Initiative and OECD, a lot of these recommendations are similar, meaning you need systemic approaches, you need a coordinating team, you need solid strategic planning, then compulsory professional development. You need to train learners to be good learners online. We cannot assume learners are okay and they know how to learn alone home. We need to educate them, and of course their families. And lastly, we need to think collectively about the curriculum. We've been rewriting the curriculum since I was in primary school. We write it and then we still, every struggle every teacher has is to cover the content. We need to at least decide globally, what do we want our learners to know, and focus on those. And of course, we need to give more value to our teachers. Teachers are the agents of change. Teachers are the ones who can bring about and implement all this. So I will stop here. I have a lot to say, but I would rather stop here, and I would be glad to discuss with you anything you would like. Thank you for the time.
Many thanks, Bambos, for the really very interesting results, even part of the results presented. I lost connection? No,
I stopped the sharing. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, we are hearing you. I was saying that it was really interesting to present this part of the results of this great research, and I'm going to give some time to relax a few moments, and I would ask the participants to write their questions on the chat. We collect them, but let's challenge the discussion with 2 poll questions. I would kindly ask Luca to present the first question, and you have 30 seconds to respond. So the question is, in response to school closures, schools implemented distance learning programs and open educational applications that schools and teachers used to reach learners remotely in order to limit the disruption of education. Please choose the number. 1 is the minimum, 10 is the maximum, that reflects the extent and the scale that this happened in your case, your country, your school, your system. It's a personal question. So we have the result. So the results are showing that participants think that it was above the half of the scale, the extent to which we applied remote e-learning processes. So we share similar experiences through Europe. And I would kindly ask Luca to present the second question, and then give us another 30 seconds. As the pandemic progresses, schools may proceed with remote learning. To what extent do you think school practitioners, teachers, and leaders were empowered to respond to the demands of schools reopen? Okay, we are ready to. Somewhat is the dominant answer that shows that things were not so bad, but there is space for improvement. Now, I will combine the 2 answers and I address the questions to both presenters. By the time we had similar experience, we responded to the need for education by implementation of remote learning processes. How do you comment the fact that there is space for supporting teachers and school leaders? I would like to have both perspectives, the research perspective and of course the political perspective. Who wants to start answering?
Andreas, I think is appropriate to start. Yes, thank you, Pambo, for giving me the floor. With regards to what you asked, Kostas, I think that taking into account that, as Pambos has said, this is not something that we have expected. We had to act in circumstances that were emergent, that we were under pressure to respond basically to basic needs. We had pupils that didn't have any device to connect to the internet. We had other pupils that didn't have connections. So there were quite a few practical problems that the ministry had to respond to. But it is also a fact that the teachers were not ready. They were not trained before. So here, I think it is something that we should admit, but taking into account and judging into seeing the things after the first months, I think under all the circumstances and the difficulties and the challenges we had to face, at least we tried at the very best at the ministry to respond to the demands of pupils and teachers. If we have succeeded, or if we could have made things better, of course, there is always room for improvement. But the point is that we didn't sit in the office and did nothing. We tried working quite a lot, the people who had the responsibility to do this. And we think under the taking into consideration all the above, we responded to a satisfactory extent. We do recognize that there is still room for improvement. That's why the efforts still continue with regards to teachers training, with regards to the equipment that all schools should have. So the whole effort is in progress.
Thank you, Andreas, for your answer. Pambos, maybe have your perspective, and you can also comment on Andreas' answer too.
Look, I think it was clear that no country was ready. There were an unbelievable amount of extra effort during the pandemic to support the teachers and schools. Of course, it was not possible to support them all at the same level in such a crisis situation. But I think we are learning as a country, we are learning, and but we have to make adjustments. We already made some, but I think there is also a lot of room to make more,
From my experience, teachers invested much effort on taking capability and confidence regarding technology. And when they did so, they felt that they were unable to transfer the curriculum they were used to teach through an e-learning process. That's why I've set the question. Now, let me please transfer some of the questions from our participants. The first question is for Andreas. How much is the national and how much is left to autonomy in the curriculum for schools? To what extent the curriculum is national, and what is the autonomy left for our schools? This is the question, Andreas.
Basically, there is no room for flexibility within the curriculum. So the curriculum is nationally set. It's central for all schools around Cyprus. Teachers are required to teach the curriculum, but however, there is some autonomy, I would say, with regards to the methodology they can use, with regards to the resources, the extra material that they can use in order to succeed. What is required is the success and adequacy indicators that by the ending of each grade, the pupils should possess. So if we have in mind, let's say, situations in countries whereas the local authorities or the schools themselves decide The curriculum, this is not the case for Cyprus. The curriculum is centrally prescribed by the ministry and is the same around all schools in Cyprus.
Another question for you, Andreas. Was there a financial support from EU to the Cyprus educational system during this period?
During this period, specifically for dealing with the pandemic issues, I think not. However, now we are in the process for within the framework that the Union has decided to all countries to take some resources for Cyprus and use them for basically some of the needs that were identified in the system.
The question was focused about the digital teaching. There was not any kind of support in developing digital teaching, you mean?
No.
Okay, thank you. Now, Andrea, thank you very much for your questions. I will come to you again. Bambos, I will transfer to you some of the questions. Have you considered, in the recent context, a continuity between lessons in presence and lessons through distance learning? Is there a continuity among the two procedures?
So if I understood the question, because I read it in the chat, meaning teaching in the classroom and then have students remotely?
Yes, I think this is what I have understood, at least.
Yes.
Yes.
So, during the pandemic, it was not a possibility from what I recall because everybody was home. Only later in May when schools opened, but again then I think we either have them there or not have. Now there is discussion and we read in the media and talking to people that this is the hybrid model, what is called, meaning when you have 5 students that have symptoms and they have to stay home, how to be broadcasting live to them the lesson. It's a possibility. The truth is that there is a resistance from teacher unions on this. The reasons that they cite are there is no scientific evidence to prove this, which in my view is false. And the other is the GDPR issues. But I think that probably we're the only country that discusses still whether the camera should be on or off. But it would be good to hear also from colleagues what is the discussion they have in their countries and whether teaching is allowed to have the camera on, at least for the teacher, you know? Because the research shows eye contact is critical for the effectiveness of online. If you shut the cameras completely, then we're talking about interactive radio, okay? So it would be interesting to hear from other countries as well.
Yes, I will investigate this, whether the participants may use verbal intervention. But until then, I would ask, do you think that current curricula could be directly transferred in another path from in-presence to distance learning, or do we need to make some changes on current curriculum?
Good, very good question, and it's very important to clarify this. When we teach, what do? We say, this is the learning objectives I want to achieve. These are my learners. These are their skills. This is the method I will use. Within that method, which we call pedagogical approach or learning design or instructional design, in several cases in the classroom, we use technology, okay? When we go fully online, we need to consider online, what am I allowed to do and what infrastructure I need for that, what are the skills of my learners, and how much I can adjust. Of course, because I see another question about primary education. Of course, online education will not replace everything we do. And of course, it will not replace, particularly in the primary school years, where the social content and socialization and the physical presence is an important part of developmental, okay? However, when we design, of course, we can design for a lot of the courses, but that was one of the needs that we identified and also is known in the literature. We need to train our teachers. What does it mean to design and teach online? So that have the proper skill set, both pedagogical, but also technology skills to be able to match and develop the course to teach it online.
Thank you, but I will challenge you further with a next question, because you mentioned that myths, there are some myths about online education.
Yeah.
The colleague says that she cannot imagine online education can be useful at the same level as in-presence education at school, at least not for primary schools. Young kids at ages of 6 to 10, this is the target group, we cannot imagine how we can replace real social contact. That is missing. And my question, my addition to this question is, do you perceive distance learning as a solution by the need of the time, or as a substitute for in-presence education?
Good question, Costa.
But this is not my question because it's from Hannah. Okay.
Good question from the colleague. Look, I personally think that online education for young children is not a long-term solution. It's a solution for times of crisis, particularly for the age group of 6 to 10. Okay? If you do a Google search, that's one of the main reasons you will not find much research and work on online education for those age groups. However, for the high school ages, there is a lot of work out there that shows, yes, it's possible. But we should not underestimate the potential of achieving learning out working online. But the idea of developing social skills, character education, of course we need both the face-to-face and the online. But I don't think we should, it's either or, meaning it's either a substitute or a need of the time. If you go online now, you can learn anything you want in any area, basically. There are so many resources, and if there is one thing we all agree that one of the important skills we want our learners is to learn how to learn. So it's important to learn in groups, it's important to learn in school, but for their lifelong learning takes place already. My son is 10 years old and he learns, anything I ask him, he will look at a YouTube video and explain to me. They spend hours learning from each other and collaborating and discussing. So, you know, I think it's not a substitute. It's part of life changes at this point, the ability to learn online.
Okay. So the one is not against the other. Thank you, Bambos. Now I'm coming again to Andreas. There are a few questions from the colleagues and participants, but I will leave them for later. Andreas, operating schools in a context of a centralized system like Cyprus system proved to be an advantage or disadvantage in our effort to respond to the crisis demands? What does our experience say?
The answer questions might be yes or no. Yes, and I will explain why I give this answer. Yes, because in such cases of emergency, of crisis, where decisions need to be taken and given to schools for implementing, I think it is better to have the same instructions, the same guidelines given to all. So because this is something that we are facing for the first time, I think it was better to have a central direction as to what the schools would do. At the same time, the fact that the schools, the teachers, the whole system is used to the centralization for so many years now, this has led to the lack of autonomy, or if you say the flexibility of taking initiative. They all wanted the center to give instruction. They didn't take the initiative to decide and implement. That's not something that I'm judging, but I'm saying that since the schools and the whole system is used to how the instructions were given, we noticed that even though they could have taken some decisions within the current law and the regulations, indeed, they expected that the ministry gave guidelines, gave directions for every matter, where, in my opinion, they could have taken the initiative and decide on themselves. I know cases where head teachers didn't wait for the ministry to give the instructions. They took the initiative and took decisions and did things.
But the centralization facilitated the implementation of a common policy to all public schools. Okay,
Yeah.
Thanks for your answer. Bambos, regarding the aspect of social justice, many teachers complained that they lost their power to intervene with students from disadvantaged backgrounds, and they realized that the gap became bigger. They realized that their power to do something for their students coming from disadvantaged, and they felt into risk during the period of lockdown. Did you notice something similar in your research?
Yeah, that's John. And we know that also globally, that in such cases, when we don't even have the students in the classroom to actually be able to talk to them or communicate, and they are remote, and they are already from marginalized groups with no access either to a device or internet, it accentuates the problem. It makes it even bigger. But
even in cases they had access to technology and internet, they didn't have the support from the families.
Exactly. Particularly, as you know, in primary schools, it's even more difficult because there you expect the parents to support young kids to connect online, complete an assignment, submit it. Even in my son's school, the teacher would send us a PowerPoint. We need to do some exercises from the book, take it, a photo with the mobile, and email it back. I mean, a lot of parents who do not have access to download the PowerPoint, open it, and sit down with their child, it creates even bigger problems. But those are deeper structural social injustices that we know exist in societies.
Yes.
I mean, take, for example, the migrant kids. We have an excellent program running with Andreas' team at the Ministry of Education, and we are now in almost 40 schools teaching children of migrant background the Greek language and giving them tablets. And now we are giving them ahead of time, so in case of a lockdown, they can have a device, you know? But
yes, these are realities that were noticed by our teachers. May I address a kind request to Lutza? Lutza, may we prepare a question whether cameras are allowed to be open or closed during distance learning processes in other European countries, please, because
yes, 1 second.
Okay, so we don't want to break the rule. Andreas, I'm coming back to you again. There is a question about special education and the measures taken regarding the support towards special education in Cyprus.
We are talking, Kostas, generally, what is the policy for special education, or during the pandemic period?
I guess during the pandemic, because we are focusing on the pandemic today.
Okay. So basically, with regards to special education provision during the pandemic, as all schools, we had pupils of special schools at home. However, when the schools reopened in 20th of May, I think was the first day, we had 20 seconds was for all. Okay. We had a communication with the Ministry of Health, and for those students that had a serious health problem, that are we answering the question now?
Yes, we may answer it, but we have only 20 seconds. You can keep answering your question. We are going to collect data.
Okay. We had asked these pupils to bring a certificate from their doctor that they were in a position to attend school and they didn't have serious danger of getting the virus. So this caused quite a big turbulence in the system, because the ministry was accused of segregating children with special needs. And quite a big number of students returned to their schools as the doctors said that they were not having any danger. For those students who were at home, distance education and material was sent to them at home or online. And for the current school year, we didn't have this process. All pupils now were allowed to return to their schools, and now we have the opposite situation where parents refuse to send their children to school, saying that I don't want my child to be in danger of getting infected in school. So now we are we have the tendency to move from one end to the other, and I do hope that we will find the pendulum soon.
Thank you, Andreas. There is a comment from a colleague from Italy saying that the situation is really complicated in Italy because there are differences between regions and school levels. This is something you might comment, Andreas, because in our case in Cyprus, the centralized character of the system allowed a common policy to be implemented with small differentiations. And again, thanks for the answer regarding the special education, because it's a really very demanding area. Pambos, do you think that we can expect that e-learning will be widely used after COVID? There are some good practices to keep after COVID?
Definitely. I think that good e-learning, meaning good use of technology for teaching and learning, is something we've been trying to implement for decades now. I think it's here to stay. It will not replace the teacher. That's not the objective, and that cannot happen. However, particularly in elder groups like upper primary and secondary schools, there are a lot of good things that can happen, and even a lot of the material you can develop that people can learn online and then use the face-to-face more productively. And one model is the flipped model. You have people do things, and then when they come in face-to-face, they can practice social skills, the collaboration aspect, the socialization. It's a lot of things that can be done, but it's definitely here to stay, yeah?
Yes, okay. There are some comments, and we already have the results from the poll question regarding the camera, the use of camera. As I've noticed, there are answers saying that camera is not allowed, camera is allowed, or is an optional. And there are some comments about the rights, about the interaction, and about the ability to confirm whether the student is present or not. So do you have any comment regarding, I'm reading the last comment, I repeat that I've been writing just now, Italian situation is really complicated because now that our nation has been divided in 3 parts, red, orange, and yellow. Okay, different conditions, different problems in a bigger country. Well, so Andreas and Pambos, I will give you the opportunity for a final comment. You have 60 seconds. both of you, each one of you, before closing this very interesting webinar today?
Andrea?
Bambos, I will start again first. Thank you, colleagues, for staying with us until now. I guess that you found our presentations interesting, and we do hope that at least we gave you our perspective and some insights from the way that Cyprus responded to this crisis. And I would like to thank again the organizers for giving us the opportunity to participate in this interesting event. Thank you, and stay safe.
Thank you, Andreas. Thank you.
I would also like to thank all of you for the opportunity to talk to you, and Kostas and the team for inviting me. Just remember that what we do as educators is much more important than any technology, and online education is just a tool, and it's important to keep that in perspective. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the optimistic comments, both of you. Before ending this webinar, let me read some comments I collected yesterday through my preparation. Educators, psychologists, academics, and others agree that children of school age are the biggest victim of the current situation. Limitations limit their experiences and their opportunities for joy and interaction. Taking this into consideration, yesterday in an interview, the regional director in Europe from World Health Organization, Dr. Hans-Henrik Kluge, yesterday was that, said that it was seen an explosion of coronavirus cases in the region and warned for a tough time ahead as mortality rates rose. However, the regional director supported that we need to keep the schools open really until last, because we cannot afford a COVID-19 lost generation. I think that there is no comment after this statement. Teachers can do great things. I would like to thank ESHA again for this opportunity. Thank everyone for staying with us until the end. And please be in touch. The recorded webinar will be released in the days that are following. And of course, we're going to send information about the following webinars in this educational series that has been scheduled from ESHA. Thanks, Lutza. Thanks, Fred. Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, Bambos. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you all.
See you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Many thanks.